and I'm happy you are you, my friend, and I'm awfully glad that I'm me. I love you for who you are, and friends will always be. We've traveled different paths, my friend, along life's winding journey, yet I have always been with you as you have been with me.
Welcome. My name is Rob McAndrews. I'm a resident of Marblehead, professor of social work at Salem State College, and president of the board of the Holocaust Center of Boston North, which is located at the Peabody Essex Library. With me today is a friend of mine, Apo Torosyan. He will be talking today about the Armenian Genocide. In an earlier program, we discussed the historical background leading up to the Armenian Genocide. Today, we'd like to focus on some more modern aspects, more contemporary issues with respect to the genocide. Apo, I want to welcome you to the program. You have a very diverse background as an artist, as a poet, as a writer, and of more recent history, you've become a filmmaker. And I understand that you have a film entitled The Morgenthau Story. Explain a little bit about what inspired you to produce this film, what interested you to spend all the time that you did in making this remarkable film.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you and with your audience. I just want to give a quick reason behind how I'm intrigued and fascinated with the world of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, I have done exhibitions. I had hundreds of solo and group exhibitions around the country and the world. Even the last, one of the most prestigious ones at the Holocaust Museum. When you think that you might have 3,000 or 4,000 visitors to see your exhibit, when you work for years to do this presentation, it's not enough. If you want to reach beyond that, how do you do? This is what I discovered by making a film. Okay. Because I'll give you an example. Because the Armenians, they commemorate the Armenian Genocide every April, okay, for the past 96 years. My films, not only in that month, but my films are shown around the world in so many places. I never been, I never met those people. And I'm talking about in 1 hour, you can reach up to 100,000 or 200,000 people, right, because it's on television.
Right.
It's
right,
quite different than having an exhibition of your paintings or your presentation to public.
I understand.
That I'm very much grateful that I got to filmmaking.
Was there a particular genesis, a spark of your interest in focusing on the late former ambassador Henry Morgenthau? What inspired you to go in that direction?
My film, one of my first film, which I did it in 2003, it was called Discovering My Father's Village, Edincik, which was, I went to my father's village as an undercover. My Turkish is very good, very fluent, so no one can trace any other accent in my Turkish. I went there as a history, studying history as a reporter, okay, with a Turkish friend of mine. Mm. And I made a film on that, Discovering My Father's Village. Without my knowing, my film was being shown in Yerevan, the state capital of Armenia, on television. And this gentleman, which was a professor from Athens, was visiting for a seminar. They had meetings. And he saw the film. He was intrigued with it. Mm-hmm. He liked my style.
Okay.
And he did find, through his students, to reach me in this country, in the United States, mm-hmm, to ask me to make a film about Henry Morgenthau Sr., the ambassador. The Greeks historically are very grateful to what the ambassador did for them, because Henry Morgenthau himself, which was an ambassador to Ottoman Empire in Istanbul, in the city I was born, in 1913 to 1916, he witnessed of what was happening because you were getting the reports from all over Anatolia about the Armenian Genocide.
I see.
And he just daily visited the leaders to stop the killings, and he couldn't because he's the head of the ambassador department.
Right.
He would receive, he has consuls
Sure.
and witnesses
Yeah.
all over Anatolia, and they all sending him this information that the Armenians are being killed left and right, day and night, indiscriminately, including children. And he has been sending this information to United States. All that information is at the Library of Congress today, over 30,000 pages
Wow.
from that time.
Wow.
You have to realize, not only that, the New York Times itself had, in 1915, 150 front page announcements about the Armenian Holocaust. The word Holocaust was used in that time. So the Armenian Genocide was quite well known what was going on around the world, in Europe, in the United States. And United States had a humanitarian help, but there was no military intervention. He quit his post, came back to America, and wrote his book, The Henry Morgenthau Story. And he was sad that he was not successful to stop the killings. But by 1923, when the World War I ended, and there was a treaty between Turkey and Greece of the exchange of the minorities, 400,000 original Turks went back to Turkey, and 1,650,000 Greeks and Armenians, survivors of the genocide, went to Greece. And that was done by the leadership of Henry Morgenthau Sr., the ambassador. And he was in charge. He took that post without getting any pay. He just didn't want to get any pay. He just wanted to do it for the people's sake.
When did you first learn about Henry Morgenthau's activities on behalf of the Armenians?
I read his book a long time ago, before I was offered for the film. And when this professor said, you know, could you make a film for us for half an hour? And I said, you're talking about a giant. How can I fit a giant in half an hour? I mean, that won't be fair. At least 1 hour would be sufficient. So we discussed the budget and all that. And finally, we came to a conclusion that 1 hour was the sufficient time. Then it took me 2.5 years to make it.
And during that time, you had access to the Morgenthau family, to grandchildren, to many documents and archives. You mentioned how many pages in the Library of Congress? Did you say
30,000 pages.
30,000 of cables, of memos going back and forth. And in 2.5 years' time, you then put together your film, the Morgenthau Story.
I did not go as far as going into details of those documents and all that, because I'm a photographer, I'm a movie maker, not a historian. Even though I look at history as a historian view, I try to make it more of a visual storytelling. And as you know, I'm an oral historian.
Would you provide a brief description then of the making of this film?
Of the film.
Some of the stages that you went through.
Yes.
Were there any frustrating periods at all?
Of course. Is there an easy way? It was not easy. It's a difficult family to get close by. My beginning, the opening of the door started with Pam Steiner, Dr. Pam Steiner. She is the great-granddaughter of the ambassador. And once I had my report with her, which she did like what I did, and we had a mutual agreement of what I was going to do with her part, then I indirectly find a liaison to the grandson, the DA from New York City.
Robert
But
Morgenthau.
yes, but
Okay.
he was another difficult person to get in touch. You don't go and knock the door of a DA and say, hey, can I have an interview with you? You have to realize those people, first of all, they want all the questions in advance. So you just don't start questioning them. I had over 50 questions sent to them, and they say, okay, I'm going to take this and that, so I was prepared with my questions. Then, indirectly, I did find his assistant of the DA.
Okay.
Through a friend of mine, a newspaper editor. So he said, this guy works for the DA. So I got in touch with him. He happened to be an Armenian guy.
Wow.
Same age as my son, and as lovely as my son. Very excitable. I said, great, okay. Peter is his name. Peter Kugasyan. Great, he says, let me check your background. So I emailed him and said, wow, he says, you're great, you're perfect for this job. And next thing you know, he made arrangements, so we met in the city of New York, and I'd never been in a police limo, and the DA's office was like visiting the fortress of Fort Knox. But it was a pleasure to meet him. Such an intelligent person, such a in-depth personality. His office was like a museum. From pictures of the history of New York City, all the mayors and the DAs,
and all the major legal cases of the city's history,
and plus, of course, their grandfather's pictures with FDR and everybody else. So the most rewarding part at the end was still touches to my heart. I said to Robert Morgenthau, I said, Your Honor, I said, this was a privilege for me, for giving me this opportunity to do this with you. You know what he said? He says, you're doing a godly job. I was stunned. I was stunned. It's an incredible compliment.
Potential risk. You mentioned that for your first film, when you went back to Turkey?
Yes.
That you had to go undercover. And I'm wondering if you could just say a few words about why that was, and whether or not in taking on doing this project, whether or not you felt that there was an element of risk.
I still live with that risk, even in this country. The Turkish government creates their history with lies. And anybody reveals that is insulting Turkishness. If you say the word Armenian genocide, they have a penal code 301. It says that's insulting Turkishness. The jail sentence is up to 10 years. I have friends today, they are facing jail, or they are in jail. They are reporters, writers, historians, because either indirectly they spoke about the Armenian genocide, or they used the word Armenian genocide, or they put somebody else's words into a book and translate it.
There's a law in Turkey prohibiting talking about Armenian genocide.
Absolutely.
And this law covers historical work.
Anything.
You have a friend very recently who went to jail for speaking about this issue.
Yes. Yes. Or translating it.
So for you personally, taking on this project, there's an element of risk.
Yes, but I owe that to my grandparents. When I did my first film, I said, this is my father's village story. But actually, this is the gravestone of my grandparents, because they don't have one. Most Armenians were just left on the side of the road. They were eaten by vultures and wild animals. Left on the side of the... They didn't have a chance to bury their own dead ones. So I don't know where my grandparents died. I know what city they died, but I don't know where they were buried, ever. The film is their graveyard. I did it for their honor. And I do it for all the Armenians and the Greeks and all genocide victims around the world.
When we speak of the Armenian genocide, I know that you're careful to clarify that Armenians were not the only innocents to die in very large numbers. So you also include
Greeks and Assyrians. Greeks were killed a year after. 1915 was Armenians. And this is in records told by those young Turks. They said, now it's time for the Greeks.
A political wing called Young Turks.
Yes.
And approximate numbers that historians usually account in terms of the victims of Armenians, Greeks, and others?
Approximate. There are different resources.
Yeah.
And these days, the Turks, or some siding with Turks, they play with the numbers. Numbers is not important.
Yeah.
It's the action that's important.
Right.
Whether it was 100,000 or 100 million does not make any difference. Genocide is genocide. Right. Genocide is a murder of a race, a murder of a group. If we open up the page, what it means genocide, it says it all.
Your contention is that the mass murder, the genocide that took place, was deliberate and an intentional policy on the part of the Turkish government.
Absolutely.
During World War I.
And not only that, it continues. Let me tell you the final stage of the film.
Yeah.
The premiere was done in Athens, Greece, in the year of 2008. And I was very privileged to go and show the film in one of the schools that was built by Henry Morgenthau, the ambassador in the city. And the place was filled to capacity. It's an old school. It was a rainy night, dripping water in one corner, didn't matter. The windows were open, there's no air conditioner. It's summertime, you can hear the cars, the honking and all that. I couldn't hear the film. But I said, oh, this is a disaster for me. You know, after working 2.5 years, I'm in the city, and these people are here to see the film, and they cannot hear it. At the end of the film, everybody got up and raving about the film. And because I speak 5 languages, they all start coming to me and speaking in 5 languages. I said, how did you figure out what the film was all about? Well, they said, we read the Greek subtitles. Yes, because the film was translated to Greek before my arrival. So they worked on it for a couple of months to do it. So it was
What made you decide to have the first showing, the premiere, in Athens, Greece?
Oh, they decided. The organizer. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The organizer, because they are the one that they funded this event. Yeah. And first it was at school. That's the night before. Right. But the main opening was in Athens on a big theater. Was full, again, full to capacity with television and whatever. It was an incredible evening. For me, the most memorable part of the evening was all that audience, of course. For me, it's a big honor to share that. But to see my friends from Turkey. They're afraid to correspond with me because the government is watching out of who I speak with. And so they couldn't respond to my emails. But I had emailed them saying that so-and-so date I'm going to be in Athens showing the film. I hope we can see. Wow. And they were in the audience. Wow. We hugged and kissed each other. It was immortal for me. And that shows the Turkish government's attitude. You know. The film is, as I said, I interviewed 2 grandsons of the ambassador and the great-granddaughter. Right. And it's a more of a American intellectual view than Armenian national view, which is more historical and more personal comparing with the American. These people, they just saw what their grandfather did, and they follow the history, and they saw that's still going on. Right. Their comments are very, very valuable, very valuable. And in the film, you'll see the Smyrna Massacres. Now, the Smyrna Massacres is another historical, political game that was played to the minorities, which was terribly, terribly wrong. which was done by the British and the French. They encouraged the Greeks to go and invade Turkey, and then they got massacred. This is all in the film, including the footage of the burning of the city. Whatever is happening today, the denial, it's not only Turkey that's denying. There's a lot of other countries are denying the Armenian genocide or the genocide itself. You know, there's no accountability. Why? The story goes way back to the time when World War I ended. Churchill, who says, crime against humanity. He's using those words. It was used by him first time. He talks about the Armenian genocide, saying that in Turkey, if you want to have a death sentence, all you have to just be an Armenian. You know, this is historically is known what's happening around the world.
Young Churchill making these references.
Churchill was great, and in my film I have a good presentation of his views. He was not popular at his time with his views. The British and the French, they played different games. That's the intriguing part of history.
But you're presenting the point of view that the continuation of the lack of accountability, the lack of recognition today, you really have to go back to the seeds of this denial
end of
at
World
the end
War
of World War I.
End of World War I is a good example of how the world is reacting then and how the world is reacting now.
Right.
Woodrow Wilson was a humanitarian, okay? And he was very close with Morgenthau, and that's why Morgenthau ended up going to Turkey as an ambassador. And Woodrow Wilson, at the end of the war, at the Paris Treaty, he created a map that's quite different than what it is today. And Turkey wouldn't be the way it is if that treaty was practiced. But he was ill. In the meantime, the Turkish government started getting powerful within itself. They denied the Ottoman Empire with the leadership of Ataturk, which in reality he was a continuation of the Young Turks. He still didn't want to have minorities in Turkey, but he didn't preach that way. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. So with his leadership, the Turkish Republic was coming on the surface, and they denied and turned their backs to the Ottoman Empire. But in that time, it's a very important thing that my good friend Taner Akçam has a book about it. It's going to come translated to English soon. It's about the trials, the military trials, when there's all these testimonies by the Turkish generals saying that what they did was murder. They killed the innocent people. This is all on records. But the Turks say, oh, that was under the British rule, and they were forced to say that. They were not. The Ottoman Empire decided to have this military court, but Turkey denies it. Doesn't matter. It's on records. And those are translated now to Turkish, and from Turkish they're going to be translated to English. Then everybody will be able to read the history, the truth.
Between the two wars, I'm curious about now the connection between Turkey and Germany.
Germany was very close to the Ottomans from the 19th century on. During the World War I, the Germans knew they were going to lose the war. And this information was given by their ambassador, Wangenheim, to Ambassador Morgenthau. Because Morgenthau was a German Jew, came to the United States 10 years old, so he knew fluent German, and they trusted him like he was a German. He was not, he was an American. But they gave him the information. And he was told that they were planning World War II already by the end of World War I. They knew they were going to lose World War I. Those generals were advising the Turks how to kill, how to demolish the Armenian nation, then the Greeks and the Assyrians, the minorities. And they practiced in Germany on Jews. But those generals, they worked for Hitler. I have their names in my list. The interesting part, that Talat Pasha that was killed by the Armenian survivor,
Right.
his remains were returned to Turkey by Hitler in 1943. That shows the mutual trust and connection. And today, my Kampf is #1 seller in Turkey. And you see swastikas on the streets today, and they were praising Hitler for killing the Jews.
So the continuation of the Nazi ideology, Hitler writes his book Mein Kampf. In the 1920s, it becomes part of the foundation and doctrine of the new Nazi state. In the 1920s, you're presenting information of this alliance that continued between Turkey and Germany
Yes.
Prior to World War II.
Yes.
And that the ideas around the extermination of a presumed inferior race of people, a genocide of a race of people, of Armenians and of Greeks. You're saying that the Germans carried that same ideology, that same propensity to do away.
But I like to make a point.
Yes.
Not today.
Yeah.
Not today. Germany recognizes the Armenian genocide.
Ah.
And
yeah.
Germany is no longer Turkey's ally, but Turkey itself still continues to be a racist society and racist country.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that all Turks are racist.
No, of
All
course
right?
not.
I mean, I have,
Of course not.
there's over 40,000 people have signed up on the internet. They have their names on, including my friends. We apologize, they say, for what happened to the Armenians.
What incredible risks they're taking.
Yes, but they accept the Armenian genocide. But they cannot say Armenian genocide.
The
Genocide.
American Armenian community today, I presume that they're active on this issue of trying to raise the awareness of the world concerning the issues of accountability and recognition of the genocide.
Of course,
Yeah.
Armenians have been trying this for the past 96 years. They have not been successful because they're poor. They don't have enough money to back them up. You know, America has some powerful lobbying, but outside of that, France has the second one. But outside of that, there aren't enough power to convince the world that Armenian
Is the American power elite on, well, to put it bluntly, on your side?
As I said earlier, money is #1 enemy of humanity. So recognition of Armenian genocide and money conflict with each other. Our corporations, they have $7 billion worth of business with Turkey. There's over 200 corporations in America that's dealing, selling, and buying from Turkey. Those corporations have tremendous influence on our government. Almost all our presidents have recognized the Armenian genocide before they were elected.
Okay.
Except the only one that spoke up about the Armenian genocide was Ronald Reagan. Except outside of them, the rest of them, including our present President Obama, he recognized the Armenian genocide and he said he was going to talk about it, but he does not, because we have to deal with Turkey with soft gloves. That is the major problem. We do not have accountability, and the question is not Turkey. The question is the genocide itself. We're not dealing with it. We have no accountability. We're not punishing. There's no system that punishes the guilty, the criminal. The perpetrator is not punished. Most genocides are covered up because someone is benefiting from it. All the documentations are available. The Turks have distorted their history, and because of that, they cover it up. You know, according to the Turkish history, which was created in the 1930s, the Turkish language was in Arabic. Handwriting was Arabic.
Right.
And during the Ottoman Empire, not too many people were educated, so they couldn't even read Arabic. So when they converted to the Latin alphabet. Everybody start learning. There's more reading, but the history was changed. The history was rewritten by the Turkish government. Until 1980s, there was no mention of Armenians in the history of Turkey.
So today, the official Turkish government perspective on what you and I refer to as clearly the Armenian Genocide, what is their interpretation? What do they say occurred?
Armenians did sided with the Russians. The war in Sarıkamış of 1914, when Enver Pasha was fighting with the Russians, because of his mismanagement, bad leadership, he lost over 80,000 soldiers, froze to death. Amongst them were Armenians, because Armenians were Turkish soldiers.
Yeah. Drafted
right?
or
drafted,
whatever.
yes.
Yeah.
Armenians did fight the Balkan War too, 1912, 1913. They died in Balkans for their country.
Yeah.
Right. But in between, they were not allowed to be
So 80,000
military.
soldiers, Turkish soldiers, die, and they blame their
The
deaths.
reason they blame because 1,000 or 500 soldiers of Armenian descent, Turkish soldiers, defected to the Russian side. That's all. Because of that, they blame the entire Armenian nation of being traitors. According to them, I'm a traitor.
And therefore, there's a license to kill
They had to force the minorities,
civilian population.
civilian population, out of strategic points, which was not. They
For
moved
their
them,
own safety?
Yes. In reality, they moved them. First, they killed the men to begin with.
Okay.
Then they killed women and children on the way. They raped and killed. And whoever survived, they were killed in the desert when they arrived to Syria.
Were there pockets of resistance?
Yes, very few. There were some, they call them chetes, which they armed themselves, went to the mountains for revenge because they lost everything. They lost their family, their wife,
Right.
children, and all that. They attacked indiscriminately to the Turks. Not only that, the Armenians, they accept that accept almost 20,000 Turks were killed by the Armenians, but that was by the end of the war.
Okay.
That was a revenge.
Okay.
They couldn't protect themselves because they were all killed before that.
But in 1915, you're saying that the first wave of Turkish soldiers went after the men first,
Yes.
gathering the men up,
Yes.
Telling the men that they were going to be serving in the forces,
Right,
or
and dig the ditches.
building
and,
roads
yeah,
and so forth.
They were called amelet taburu.
But actually, they were slaughtering these men.
Yes, that includes my uncle. What you're saying is very interesting, is what the Turkish government says today.
Right.
Okay, that's very important. Not only that, here's the Armenians are so much, it's an insult to call somebody Armenian in Turkey. It's like World War II. Call somebody Jew
Yeah.
was an insult.
Ah.
That's how it is in Turkey today. Not only that, you die and you donate your house to the church,
Yes.
the government takes that. You cannot donate. There's no donations to institutions. You know, they try to deprive as much as possible. They just don't want whatever is left from millions. It's
Yeah.
only 60, 70,000 Armenians are left in Turkey. And they live in fear. They cannot speak up like I do. An Armenian school today, learning Armenian is a foreign language. Where we used to learn in Armenian, now the students, they have to
foreign
learn
language.
everything in Turkish. Not only that, they have to write essays saying how bad the Armenians were in history.
Right. Right.
They're forced.
Apo, what would you want to see the Turkish government do?
First, rewrite their history books.
Yeah.
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth.
Tell the
Okay.
truth. Yes, Armenians did their mistakes. The Turks did their mistakes. Like United States. United States has a genocide in history.
Which
The
was
Native
Native Americans.
Americans. Our books today is not ashamed to write that. It's a shame that we did it, but we're not ashamed to talk about it.
Yeah.
That is humanistically the right thing to do.
It took us a while to get to that
Of course,
point, but
of course. We still
getting-
have
we're
a
getting
long way
closer.
to go. I'm lucky to be an American that I can speak up against my government.
Right.
I love my government, but I don't like
Right.
certain things what my government does, and I can speak that. That is my human right, to have human rights. Human rights violation is very important. To give equal value to all citizens
Okay.
without any discrimination. Stop the discrimination.
Allow freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. Rewrite history books.
Right.
Educate. I mean, history books, of course, will make a big difference if the public was told that they were not in Anatolia for 10,000 years.
Yeah.
They have been there only 1,000 years, and they are on the land of as an invader.
Right.
It was not their land. Henry Morgenthau Sr. was born in Mannheim, Germany, into a German Jewish family in 1856. They immigrated to the United States when he was 10 years old. He first became a lawyer, then became very successful in real estate in New York City. As a wealthy supporter of the Democratic Party, Morgenthau served as the party's financial chairman in preparation for the 2 presidential campaigns won by Woodrow Wilson. From 1913 to 1916, Morgenthau served as U.S. ambassador in Constantinople, today Istanbul in Turkey. During the Armenian Genocide, which started in April 1915, he appealed to the Turkish Ottoman leaders to stop the killings, without success. He quit his post in 1916 and returned to the United States. From the reports he received and forwarded to the U.S. government, there are over 30,000 documents still existing in the Library of Congress. Morgenthau's final post in 1923 was as the chairman of the Greek refugee settlement under the League of Nations with no pay. He died in 1946 in New York City.
My grandfather arrived in Constantinople, Istanbul today, on Thanksgiving Day in 1913. He said it was true that he didn't know anything about diplomacy, but like a good lawyer preparing his brief, he could learn in no time.
He had a great capacity to put himself in other people's shoes, feel for suffering.
Is the time for the Armenians to recognize that they were disloyal to the Turkish government. And my response always is, I don't think they were disloyal, but even if they were, not an excuse for killing all the women and children.
Today, these days we talk about it as ethnic cleansing. It's the same thing as what the Turks were doing in relation to the minorities in their country.
Let's say the Greeks are very good in not forgetting who helped them. One of the things that I think ties the Greeks and the Armenians together is that they have long memories.
And it is this that profoundly upset him. He tried to prevent further murder of Armenians by Turks while he was ambassador, took extraordinary steps to do that, was unsuccessful, and that motivated him to leave his ambassadorship.
Turks killed a lot of Greeks.
Information that came into the German embassy, who were allies of the Turks, was handed over to my grandfather through the German embassy.
He thought that that work, helping minorities who were being persecuted, and worse, being murdered, was very important. I mean, if the world had reacted to the genocide of Armenians, Hitler would have been reluctant to go out and kill Jews in a wholesale fashion. Same thing in Turkey. You had a bunch of criminals took over the Turkish government and proceeded to act like criminals.
But then instead of trying to deny it, should find redemption through accepting what happened and trying possibly to make some kind of restitution.
I just think the deniers are fooling themselves and not serving the interests of Turkey. I think it's something that the Turks should want to get behind them, because they're never going to die as long as they deny it.
It's my honor to do this with you, because I like to think of myself, because of my grandfather, as an honorary Armenian. And I like to do everything possible so that younger generations can appreciate his great humanitarian spirit and also get to know him as a family man. My grandfather was very close to his grandchildren. And for me, in some ways, he was more a father figure than my own father, because my father was very engaged in pursuing his own career at that time.
Yeah, that's that picture up there that you've seen. Yeah. Well, the family used to get together from time to time. He used to say to me, I had to wait until I was 55 to enter public service. You don't have that excuse. You ought to do it sooner. Because he entered public service, you know, when he became ambassador to Turkey.
I was born in New York City in 1940. And I had a very complicated family relationship growing up with my mother, especially as I grew into my teen years. It was very difficult because my mother, who was Henry Morgenthau Sr., the ambassador's granddaughter, had had a very complicated relationship with her mother Alma, who in turn had had a very complicated and unhappy relationship with her mother Josephine Morgenthau, who was Henry Morgenthau Sr.'s wife. And those difficulties got passed on through the family to me.
And he took on the role of speaking out in very undiplomatic fashion to the government officials and trying to stop the terrible murder of a nation, as he called it.
What happened is what upset him. What happened to the Armenians that he observed, that his consuls reported to him, that others reported to him, that he couldn't help but knowing about. And it is this that profoundly upset him. He tried to prevent further murder of Armenians by Turks while he was ambassador, took extraordinary steps to do that, was unsuccessful, and that motivated him to leave his ambassadorship right in the middle of the war. He was so upset by what was going on. And he did quit. He went back to the United States. He wrote a book to mobilize opinion, to help to record what happened, but also to mobilize opinion to help stop what was going on to the Armenians.
Even if he had been the only one reporting, genocide, I would have believed it. But I mean, he was getting reports from missionaries and other officials from all over Turkey. I mean, this wasn't just Henry Morgenthau speaking. This was Henry Morgenthau, but who collected information from a lot of other people, and it was in written form. So I just think the deniers are fooling themselves and not serving the interests of Turkey. I think it's something that the Turks should want to get behind them, because they're never going to die as long as they deny it.
Information that came into the German embassy, who were allies of the Turks, was handed over to my grandfather.
It was a very, very serious mistake with widespread repercussions. I mean, if the world had reacted to the genocide of Armenians, Hitler would have been reluctant to go out and kill Jews in a wholesale fashion. So I think the two are closely related. Failure to act, genocide of Armenians and Greeks, then followed by the world didn't react for a long time against the genocide of the Jews. I think they're all related. Shows you, civilized society, you can't afford to ignore any widespread breaking of the law.
He did, I think, extraordinary work for which he was profoundly honored by the Greek nation. And I must say, as I read it, it makes me very, very proud of both the witnessing that he did to the suffering of these refugees, the witnessing he did of the impact, the immense impact it had on the Greek nation to receive this huge number of refugees. It was about a quarter as many as Greeks in Greece.
Turks killed a lot of Greeks. I had pictures of throwing them in the water at Smyrna Harbor, which I got from my grandfather. American ships came there and tried to rescue them. But that was a sad day. Yeah, there's a street named after my grandfather in Smyrna also. One of the things that I think ties the Greeks and the Armenians together is that they have long memories.
Turks like to say was that all of this slaughter of the Armenians, which was really just in response to Armenians attacking Turks and siding with the Russians took place under the Ottoman Empire, and that the Ottoman Empire really, and the rulers of Ottoman Turkey had nothing to do with, or little to do with the modern Turkey, which started under Ataturk. But of course, Ataturk continued this slaughter and destruction of Armenians, particularly at the time of the burning of Smyrna, in which many Armenians and Greeks were attacked and escaped. Some of them escaped to Greece.
You don't deserve forgiveness, in my view, at all until you have gone through the steps of acknowledging the truth, stating the truth, acknowledging the truth, reparations, restitution, promise not to repeat, memorialization, and changing the history books. Then you deserve to be forgiven.
We accept the genocide of the Native Americans, and we accept the horrors of slavery of the African people. This has done nothing to damage our pride as Americans. In fact, probably has helped to strengthen that pride. The fact that we are all one people. The biblical statement that the sins of the father shall be inherited by the son is not true. The Germans who were born in post-Hitler period are not responsible for the tragedy of what happened, and that the Turks today are not responsible personally for what happened, and instead of trying to deny it, should find redemption through accepting what happened and trying possibly to make some kind of restitution for what happened.
Reparations, are you seeking justice for victims' sake in terms of naming perpetrators? Tell me what you want the Turkish government to do.
I want justice, not revenge.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, my belief is hope, not hate. I do not hate Turkey. I'm hoping for all humanity. It's not only for Turkey, all humanity.
Right.
I mean, as a human being, we still haven't discovered to live together on this beautiful earth we have. Instead of sharing this earth, we're just subdividing, creating ownership, and killing each other, and creating reasons to kill each other. We haven't come to that point yet.
And to have the future that you just now so eloquently spoke about, your point is that we need to reconcile ourselves with our past. We need to have full disclosure, full understanding of the past in order to have the kind of hopeful
Absolutely.
future you're talking
Absolutely. Without knowing our past, how we can know our future?
about. Why do you think the Turkish government, why are they resisting making these changes?
There are a few fears. One of them is the collapse of the national ideology. They have a national ideology. We Turks, we're this, we're that. It's all very fanatic, very racist.
Okay.
I mean, in school we were supposed to say, I'm a Turk, I'm this, I'm that. No, you're a human being. You're not a Turk. To begin with, I was not a Turk. I was not looked as a Turk, but they forced me to say I'm a Turk. Then they're afraid of restitution.
Speak about that.
All the lands that was taken away.
Yep.
For example, all the houses, the mansions that Atatürk, the Turkish leader, resided, belong to Armenians. They have names. They're in records. I know people, they still have their deeds from those days in Arabic writing with the stamps on it.
Right, right.
The top Turkish corporations are built on the Armenian fortune. The economy of today's Turkish economy developed on the Armenian fortune. During World War I, the Turkish budget tripled. During the war, every government loses money. They end up with a deficit.
With a debt.
The Turkish government tripled their national gross.
So one is a
And reparations,
political
of
and
course.
sociological reason for maintaining this ideology of nationalism, of Turkish identity, and number two has to do with reparation, actual reparations. Now that gets into money
Yes.
and property ownership and so
Yes.
forth.
Yes.
All right. Two very powerful motives, you would say, for the Turkish government not to change their policy.
I'll give you an example. When my film was on the internet, discovering my father's village, Edincik,
Yes.
this man from London sends me a letter, says, looks like I'm living in your father's house that you claim. And he says, we lived in that house, he says, but we had an electrical circuit in burned down, so I rebuilt the house. And he says, as far as I'm concerned, he says, that house does not belong to you. It belongs to Turkey. Anything in Turkey belongs to Turkey. That's the mentality.
Wow. The United States government is not supporting the kind of efforts and changes and reforms that you're talking about. I can only hope that there's enough pressure put on the current administration, present Congress, to pass a resolution recognizing the Armenian genocide. Apo, any concluding words that you would like to leave us with today?
Hope,
Hope.
not hate. That's our enemy.
Thank you so much for all your work, for this interview, and God bless you and continue your fantastic work
Thank you.
and your theme of hope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'm happy you are you, my friend, and I'm awfully glad that I'm me. I love you for who you are, and friends will always be. We've traveled different paths, my friend, along life's winding journey. Yet I have always been with you as you